So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Anders Jägerskog. I work for the World Bank, and here in the beginning, I'm sitting in and I'm monitoring closely the participant list for Claire Barrington, who was supposed to chair the session, but has had some technical difficulties in joining. So I'll try to do my best, however inadequate that will be, to cover for Claire also in that capacity. But I want to welcome everyone. I see that we still have participation going up, so we're at 60-65 right now. But we're going to have a very interesting session, I hope, with lots of participation. And I want to run you through the key things that we are planning to do in this session. First, we're going to have a presentation from the World Bank, and I'm sorry that'll be me again, where we are looking back at the lessons from the past 20 years or so working on advancing transboundary water cooperation. Then, secondly, we'll have a panel moderated by Martin Gischler on the topic of data for transboundary waters and how that helps build resilience. And finally, we'll have an open Q&A where we'd like to hear about your experiences, lessons with data, both positive and negative. And here in the beginning, I'd like to remind you what the objective of the session is. And that is to share lessons, experiences on transboundary water cooperation, but with an emphasis on data. It should focus on the how do we achieve and measure success in transboundary water cooperation, and how can the data revolution help that? So that's what we're having. Let me just check if Claire has managed to join. It doesn't seem like it. So we're going to start with a presentation that I'll be giving on the World Bank's. Let me see if I can get the presentation going here. If someone could help me to see, to tell me whether they can see the presentation.
Yes, we see it. Yeah, yeah.
Do you see it in presentation mode? Oh, sorry, this was slightly unprofessional. So here we go. We're going to talk about the transboundary waters and the World Bank perspective. And I'm, as I said, Anders Jägerskog, Senior Water Resources Management Specialist here at the World Bank, working primarily at in the MENA region, but I'm also the World Bank Transboundary focal point for global issues on transboundary waters. And I'd like to say here at the outset, I want to thank the GWSP Trust Fund, which is a trust fund supported by, among others, development partners that are going to be active in this session, including Martin from the Netherlands, but also others that I see on the list. So thank you very much for the help in supporting that. And it's been based on dialogue and input with a wide range of stakeholders, both internal and external. And the sort of context and motivation for the exercise that we undertook is to try to see why transboundary water cooperation matters to development. And I suspect that many of us here in this session will be familiar with why we at least think as a community that this is important. But let me just remind you of a few things. Sort of the overall data. We have 310, and I think counting, transboundary rivers and many more transboundary aquifers. They cover a lot of the world's surface, as you see on the map. And development, population growth, and climate change mean an increasing reliance on transboundary waters. And if we can't improve the way that we are sharing and cooperating around these waters, we will have more challenges in achieving the SDGs and the challenges that those brings. And of course, we are possibly bound to see more conflict, not necessarily violent, but conflict over these transboundary waters. And I'd like to remind you also that most of the world's transboundary rivers, they do not have a cooperative management framework. And that's a rationale for the World Bank and for others to be engaging with this. But these are some of the challenges. Let's move to the opportunities. If we cooperate better on transboundary water, we will be able to achieve water security and SDGs, facilitate investments, deliver on climate action, and strengthen resilience, support regional integration, and also provide platforms for planning and development across sectors, not only in the water sector, but energy, transport, food, public health, etc. What are then the achievements and the lessons learned that we've identified from the last couple of decades that we've been looking at in this exercise that we've been engaging in? As you may be familiar with, I mean, there's some that are more tangible and there are others that are much less tangible. Over the years, over the last couple of decades, the World Bank's facilitated around 25 billion of investments, and it managed, and this is an important point, I think, also talking about the value proposition for us as water professionals within the World Bank, but also in the wider circles, is that we are helping to manage the risks that are water related and that are transboundary related for other parts of the World Bank investment portfolio. In addition, advancing water security, energy security, and other things that I mentioned. But then moving on to the intangibles, what are the other reasons for us to engage, and what are the opportunities in these spaces? I think if you look on many of the engagements that we've been in, if it's the Mekong, the Nile, and others, we can see, if we take a sort of a bird's eye view, looking at the last couple of decades, we can see that the trust, the social capital, the networks that have been established with professionals, with policymakers across borders have actually helped to decrease tensions and also advance the development agenda. And I think we can see also on the sort of intangible, tangible, that we moved away, not in all cases, but I think we made serious headways in many places in moving away from a zero-sum game thinking, where whatever I gain is by definition your loss and vice versa. I think we managed collectively with the countries that are engaging and through the support of development partners to move the needle, the sort of the narrative, the discourse to a situation where one can look at joint benefits that can be derived from more of a cooperative management of the resources. And of course, it's helped to manage conflict and violence, we believe. Let's look at some of the, and I will do this quickly, won't go through it, some of the programs and selected achievements. You may be familiar with the Nile Basin Trust Fund, established some 20 years ago. It helped really establish the Nile Basin Initiative institutions and move the cooperation in that part of the world. That was followed up by another program that's called the Cooperation in International Waters in Africa Initiative, which has been supporting the Nile as well, but also many other engagement, not only transboundary rivers, but aquifers and other areas as well on regional waters. We also have this South Asia Water Initiative. We have the Indus, we have the Central Asia water work that the World Bank has been undertaking. And these are just some, I'm just mentioning some here, but there are others as well, the Danube, for example. And these are areas where we move the needle on investments, on information, on institution building. Here are some of the spotlights, and in the interest of time, I'll try to be as brief as possible here as well. We like to talk about the 3 I's, and investments, institutions, information are those areas. One concrete investment is the infrastructure investment on the Rusumo Falls, which is a joint project in the Nile Basin with Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania. that is at a quite advanced stage, and that was sort of coming out of the discussions that were held under the Nile Basin Initiative and the cooperation that was built there. We also have other institutional aspects, and here we can highlight the OMVS, where the Senegal River Basin Authority, where we moved to and more inclusive frameworks, also integrate Guinea into the work of this institution. Then information, Siwa river flood forecasting system is something that, have helped the countries in that part of the world come together and more collectively and better manage their joint resource in the Siwa River. In terms of the lessons learned and what works well, I think the integration among sectors works well, trying new technologies and approaches, and also the long-term perspective that the World Bank and many other development partners also has had, realizing that transboundary cooperation is also one step forward and sometimes two steps back before it moves forward again, which requires long-term engagement and a long-term view. You don't do this for 3 years. If you move in, you should do it at least, thinking decades rather than years and normal project cycles. I think what we see still being challenging is to see the links, the direct links between the intervention and the change we either are seeing and or want to see, and saying that that's a clear outcome of what we did. I think we can say that with some level of certainty, but not fully. And another challenge has been, but I think we're trying to address that as well, also to manage knowledge from what for example, may happen in Central Asia to another part of the world, and how we can learn more from that perspective. It's also challenging, as in any institution, similar it is for us, working across multiple countries, but also sectors within the World Bank, but also outside of the World Bank. But an area where we, I think, are making headways, but we still have some time, some way to go, is also the whole work on inclusiveness, which is not only gender, it's about disability and all other aspects that we are trying to address better, but still requires more work. Then moving on to the strategic directions, and I'll run through these relatively quickly here as well. We have identified 4 guiding principles. I mentioned some of them already. It needs to be long-term. We need to be flexible, realizing that development in these spaces are often guided by politics, geopolitical consideration. We also need to differentiate depending on which context we're in, and also cross-sectoral. We need to work not only with water, but also with other sectors, and also depending on which part of the world we're working in and supporting with the countries, we need to be sensitive to what they see as the links. Then in terms of strategic directions, we want to, as one, build enablers of transboundary water cooperation, and direction 2, promote 5 thematic areas. I'll get into those a little later. And direction 3, we want to advance and connect the global knowledge and analytics that we're doing. So if we look again at the enablers, we want to look at the national level as the primary entry point. And here also I'd like to mention that transboundary is not only between countries, it's also within countries. And we realized also in this exercise that we need to focus more on that as well. We are already engaged, but we see this to become an more increasingly important area for us as well. And I mentioned the 3 I's. We want to work on information, institution, and investments. We're going to continue that. We want to pursue new entry points beyond river basin organization. They are, of course, very useful and often the best tool, but sometimes there will be other entry points. And those could be, for example, utilities. It could be to work more closely with civil society organizations that'll run and drive the sort of the narrative, the discourse, the debate towards more cooperation. And that could do things that governments perhaps cannot do. Then looking at the sort of 5 themes, we've identified through the dialogue and through the exercise. Aquifers, transboundary groundwater, is an area where we haven't done enough. And I think the world at large haven't done enough. We focused on rivers, and there's a lot still to do there, but we need to increase the work on aquifers. Dam safety is also another concern that we think it needs to be addressed in a better way, in a more inclusive way from a transboundary perspective. Biodiversity conservation is not an entirely new area, but also an increasing area that we need to also think about and try to support better from a transboundary perspective. The fragility perspective, looking at conflict and violence, is something that would be front and center still. Of course, we always take the sort of the peace building lens with what we try to do, but this will continue to be important. And of course, climate. As we are moving into seeing more climate effects, as we've seen this summer, not least, and also last summer and over the last couple of years, it's just increasing, and it requires increased cooperation on transboundary water to be able to address this. And throughout as sort of a cross-cutting area, we want to see how we can use disruptive technologies to advance these areas. And that's something that the panel will also discuss at some length later on in the session. Then we want to advance and make most possible use of both internal World Bank analytics and research that we're undertaking to share lessons and approaches between regions, within regions, but also between different sectors that can be of use. But it's not only, I mean, this has been largely an internal World Bank exercise, but we recognize, of course, that we're only one part of the sort of the ecosystems of partners that are supporting transboundary waters. We need to work here with others in both advancing knowledge, building client awareness and capacity. So I'm so glad to see the participant list of the many other partners supporting this work that are in this session. Just as a final slide, I want to offer this. This is sort of the key areas, the sort of summary of what I've been trying to communicate. Why it matters, the areas of focus, and the modalities and engagement. And you see them here. I don't need to run through it, but I think this has been what has guided us through this exercise over the last year or so, as we're trying to map the new way, or not totally new, but the continuation of the World Bank engagement. And rest assured, the World Bank engagement and commitment to transboundary is still high. We want to fine tune and advance this agenda collectively together with the countries, as well as development partners that have been supporting us so far in such a great way. And I'd like to offer that as the final slide, and want to say thank you. And then I would like to hand over to Martin, who will facilitate the panel discussion on data. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your introduction and for stepping in last minute for our member who could not join. My name is Maarten Giesla. I'm a water advisor at the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I work on transboundary waters, among other. Our panel discussion will be about the data revolution. Enormous amounts of data are being generated globally, much of it through remote sensing. And increasingly, data are available also in the public domain. And these developments on the data supply and data analysis side, they hold great promise for better decision-making in times of rapid change, in terms of climate change, urbanization, etc. But how does transboundary water management benefit from that data revolution? How does it help transboundary information exchange. How does it help to build resilience? And to stay in the spirit of this Stockholm Water Week, how does it help to do so faster? How does it help coordination across sectors? That's what we'll discuss today in the panel. And we will look beyond technology to issues of institutions, behavior, and also the legitimacy of the organizations dedicated to transboundary waters. The legitimacy in the sense that people perceive that these organizations provide useful services. So we'll have 4 panelists representing perspectives from a multilateral institution, from a national government, from an intergovernmental organization, and from a UN organization. So let's start with Nusha Taibi of the World Bank. Nusha is a water resource management specialist in the World Bank's East Africa region, and she leads the work on data in cooperation in international waters, also known as the Siwa program. Nusha, how does Siwa help to build resilience through transboundary water cooperation, and what role do data play in that?
Thanks, Martin, and thanks, Anders. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So just a little bit on Siwa, the Cooperation of International Waters in Africa, which is a trust fund, multi-donor trust fund set up at the World Bank in the Water Global Practice. The main purpose of Siwa is really to work with riparian countries in transboundary cooperation. Transboundary cooperation is strengthened really by improving access to information and data, and identifying, preparing, and mobilizing sustainable investments. And in order to do that, you really have to make evidence-based decisions by utilizing cutting-edge technologies in a collaborative atmosphere. We all know that Africa is facing many challenges, the rapidly increasing population, the growing economy, the change of climate. These all increase the demand on water resources, while lack of data and information and sometimes lower technical capacity really hinders that efficient management of water resources. And this further, just come back to some of the points that my colleague Anders made, complicates that political, institutional, economic, and financial challenges that the countries are facing as they're trying to manage and develop their transboundary rivers and lakes, but also aquifers and groundwater. So that's when managing water-related hazards and risks, we're talking about floods and droughts, really become a central obstacle in strengthening Africa's resilience to climate change. So in order to have that improved management, and increase that resilience to hydrometeorological extremes, we really need to understand the water resources dynamics at the basin level. And that only can be achieved through data and information and proper observation of the resource, both at upstream and downstream. And increasing the technical capacity. So Siwa really aims to increase that resilience through various programs that we have set up. For example, in Horn of Africa, we have a program on groundwater, working with IGA to strengthen the capacity in groundwater development. After the 2020 flood in Sudan, we started a program on flood resilience, enhancing forecasting and early warning system, and improving the data and data management. But most importantly, as you mentioned, we have started a new program, Water Data Revolution, which aims to enhance access to remote sensing data and information system. And I'm just gonna give you a little bit of how the Water Data Revolution links the data providers and users together. So as I mentioned earlier, the improved management really and increasing resilience really requires understanding data at water at the basin level. But how do we really do this basin level management? Because we always say we can't manage, but we can't measure. And in Africa, the hydrometeorological monitoring networks and the current infrastructure that is placed for ground measurements have several drawbacks. In terms of coverage, the continuity cost is often very high, and instruments vary across borders. But most importantly, we're talking about cooperation. Sharing in situ data is politically and technically very difficult. So these real-time decision-making becomes impractical. So that's where remote sensing data and information combined with ground stations, of course, in situ data can really provide that continuous and reliable coverage for basin water planning and transboundary management. You know, we're talking about flood forecasting or surface water quality, you know, tracking water diversions, allocations, or even looking at quantification of water storage in reservoirs. So for example, for flood extent, you can do a flood extent, can be predicted using exclusively remote sensing data, precipitation, soil moisture, surface water, elevation. Well, I agree that remote sensing is not the panacea. It is part of the solution. And there are many free and low-cost data platforms that they collect, store, and analyze remote sensing data. But many of our decision makers, you know, river and basin organizations in Africa, they really lack that capacity to access, to manage, and adapt to these platforms to provide a solution at the scale that they need. They also need to be able to translate that data and information to a decision and be able to look at the historical trends, look at the resource, at the status of the resource, and future availability. So the opportunity is really in simplifying everything. At the top, we know that we have the technical tools, we have the remote sensing, we have the satellite, we have the data, space agencies, and universities and institutions that provide application. And the bottom, we have our end user, who are that they manage the problem, you know, our basin authorities, basin organizations, hydromet departments, dam operators. And in the middle is where we really want to connect the top down and the bottom up together. And we have been doing this in Africa by project base, but we know that we need to move on to a large scale. And we need to really change the way that we have been doing that. And that's why Siwa started this program. We want to, otherwise it's going to be slow, it's going to be expensive, and not always sustainable if we just do it project based. So Siwa's Water Data Revolution program really connects the data to the end users, and we really hope to build that capacity to be able to provide that capacity, technical capacity to the regional organizations to be able to use that data for their operations and the challenges that they face on a routine basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Nusha. So I think, I mean, the things you say are important. You know, remote sensing is part of the solution. In some ways, it circumvents obstacles, political obstacles that, you know, make in situ data not easily available and exchangeable. And then the other thing is the connection to users. Maybe one user group that is important is just ordinary citizens. We're also talking about legitimacy of these transboundary organizations. So how visible are they for citizens? And Anders said, you know, we need to work on that. What is the prospect that, you know, ordinary citizens, in terms of early warning systems for floods, for instance, that they could see the real benefits of these transboundary organizations?
So we have many of our programs, for example, the Nile program that my colleague Anders mentioned through Siwa, that you know, we work at the basin level. But for example, when the Sudan flood happened in 2020, the problem was the lack of information and enough early warning systems. So those are the ones that we want to really be able to provide first at the basin level, provide information to basin and river basin organizations, and from there we can really work on country basis to downscale the data and be able to provide a useful tool in terms of early warning system or flood forecasting. The challenge is that the opportunity is that the remote sensing data is available and is out there and it's been there for decades. The challenge is really to make a use of that in an application. For example, we're talking about flood forecasting, and to really use that to connect it to the users. But the basin organization is really put in place in good faith by countries to manage the water, because when water is transboundary, it really doesn't have borders. So we're really talking about the large scale and beyond the upstream and downstream, beyond the borders. So it's really important to work with basin organizations to really strengthen their capacity so they can provide and respond to the need of the countries that they're representing, to be able to provide that data and information. And from there, we can bring it to the project base. Yes, sorry.
Nusha, I think that's a good point to move to our next panel member, who represents a national government. that is Sif Sivadzi of the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture of Georgia. She's the first category senior specialist at the water division there. And she represents Georgia on the Global Water Partnership Central Asia and Caucasus Regional Council. Svanza, what experience and lessons can you share on data exchange for transboundary water cooperation and multi-sector coordination?
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Well, before I share some examples from Georgia's experience, I would like to stress the importance of data exchange for, as it is one of the main factors for successful transboundary cooperation. Well, I believe that data exchange is the basis for achieving common decisions and agreements on a transboundary level. But I also believe that sometimes data exchange itself to be consistent and permanent, it requires some formal basis in a way of transboundary arrangements like transboundary agreements. And while speaking about the transboundary agreements, I would like to bring a Georgia's example here. With the support of the UNEC and the Environment Agency Austria, and within the framework of the regional project EU Water Initiative Plus, the transboundary negotiations have taken place between the neighboring countries, Georgia and the Republic of Armenia, on a transboundary Hrami-Debeda river basin. The aim of the negotiations was to develop a mechanism that would enable a joint monitoring and data exchange between the countries. Well, since joint monitoring requires some harmonized methods and procedures, a guidance document was developed which incorporates such methods and procedures. And the document was developed with an active participation of national experts from both countries who were able to participate in the pilot field surveys, as well as participate in the virtual meetings to exchange opinions and views on the document and on the joint monitoring in general. Well, to ensure the consistency and permanence of the data exchange and joint monitoring in the future, a draft agreement was also developed for the relevant agencies from Georgia and the Republic of Armenia on the information sharing and the joint monitoring. The second point I believe is important for me to make during my intervention is an importance of stakeholder engagement in the transboundary negotiation processes, because any transboundary decision or an agreement requires very active engagement of national stakeholders and a strong national support. In this regard, again, with the support of the UNEC, Georgia was able to, for years, facilitate national stakeholder dialogues within the instrument National Policy Dialogues, which was done to facilitate stakeholder consultations on the transboundary as well as national policy initiatives. And the national policy dialogues involved various stakeholders coming from different sectors and fields, such as NGOs, academia, public institutions, private sector. My last point I would like to make is that besides formal transboundary cooperation, sometimes informal means of cooperations also serve well for the countries to strengthen their bilateral cooperation or transboundary cooperation. In this case, regional projects are good examples. For instance, Georgia had a really good experience within one of the regional projects, which was JEF UNDP project on Kura River Basin. And within the project framework, we were able to implement various initiatives together with our neighboring country, Republic of Azerbaijan, on the Kura River Basin. In fact, one of the components of the project was to support data and information exchange between the national stakeholders from those countries. And in this regard, regional working groups were created consisting of national experts who agreed on parameters both on water quality and quantity, and who agreed on the exchange of information and data on such parameters. So to sum up, I guess 4 key takeaways from my intervention would be the importance of data exchange for successful transboundary cooperation. Second would be the importance of formal basis in a way of transboundary arrangement or agreements for the permanence and consistency of data exchange between neighboring countries. Third would be importance of engagement of national stakeholders in the transboundary negotiation processes to gain strong national support. And lastly, it is an importance of informal means of cooperation, such as regional projects that very often pave the way towards successful transboundary cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Svanza. You made my job very easy because you summarized your presentation at the end. That's great. So let me now move to James Sauramba, the Executive Director of the SADC Groundwater Management Institute. James, thank you for being here. Now, when we talk about transboundary waters, maybe many of us will think about rivers, but of course, groundwater is also a very important domain for transboundary cooperation. What institutional experience and lessons can you share on data solutions to promote resilient transboundary groundwater management?
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you to the facilitators of this session. So I'll first of all issue a quick introduction of what SADC GMI is. We call it SADC GMI. It is a center of excellence in the SADC region, the Southern African Development Community, which is a regional economic community of 16 countries in the southern part of Africa. We actually work on groundwater. We are founded out of this SADC Protocol on Shared Water Courses, which is our flagship document that guides us in the management of water resources in our region. We also work through the 3 I's, but we have gotten another I, which is the instrument that we develop as SADC GMI to support the effective management of groundwater resources. So as SADC GMI, we have a convening mandate for groundwater. Let me say conjunctive water resources, because you cannot talk of groundwater without talking of surface water, because they are twin brothers. So we have about 30 transboundary aquifers in the region, and we also have about 15 transboundary river basin systems in our region of Southern Africa. So from our data management perspective, I'll start from the national level, where in general, we have got institutions in each one of the 16 countries that are responsible for the collection and management of data. However, we've got a general challenge that the systems do not function, or the institutions do not function as normally anticipated or as prescribed in their founding instruments, particularly because of 2 major issues. They normally cite lack of funding, and also they cite the lack of technical capacity to effectively deliver on their mandate. And there is also another challenge, which sometimes can also be just the lack of cooperation due to failure to understand the importance of data in the whole process. So since 2018, as SADC GMI, we've been working with all these 16 member states in the region in collaboration with the international and regional partners to do a gap analysis of the data collection management systems in the countries. We also established these challenges that I've highlighted. And this culminated in us developing a SADC-wide framework for data collection management. What does it do? It basically provides a guidance to all the countries on how you collect the data, how you store the data, how you process the data into information, and then how you can then share the information with those that need it. So it's more of a how document that we have developed for the national governments to facilitate the effective data collection management within the groundwater perspective. As we might know, the policy, legal, and institutional instruments that generally exist in Southern Africa at national level and at a regional level lacks the integration of groundwater. We also acknowledge the existence of river basin organizations. Currently, there are about 6 that are very active, and we believe it is a very strategic entry point to manage data. We are lucky that almost all the transboundary aquifers that we have in our region also fall within one transboundary river basin organization or the other. So we leverage on the existence of the river basin organizations that have got founding instruments or agreements that also invariably specify the sharing of data as a convening point. So we work with these river basin organizations, and we are assisting a number of them to come up with groundwater committees that report to existing structures, technical structures within the river basin organization to share data. And we are running several projects in that regard with river basin organizations because they actually are closer to the riparian member states that share data. So these are some of the very important interventions that we are implementing, and we are working with river basin organizations such as the Orange Senku, as well as the Okacom, Samcom, Kuvecom, as well as Bupusa and others in this regard. As SADC GMI ourselves, we have what we call the SADC groundwater information portal. It is supposed to eventually be a one-stop shop where if you are coming to the SADC region, you log onto that GIP, you should be able to reach out to different portals that are linked to different databases that are linked to the SADC GIP. And we also have data coming from the member states on groundwater. This is the future, and this is work in progress. A takeaway from this, the institutional arrangements within our region is that SADC has got some fairly mature institutions capable of coordinating and creating an enabling platform for developing and implementing groundwater data collection management solutions. However, the lack of capacity, be it financial and technical, is an inhibitor in a number of instances. And we hope that as we move forward with support from our partners and other technical institutions within our region, we will gradually strengthen the capacity of the institutions to manage data and collect it and feed it into information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. Then let's continue with Sonia Kappel. She is the Secretary of the Water Convention and the Co-Secretary of the Protocol on Water and Health of UNECE, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Sonia, what does the Water Convention say on data and how that could be useful to prevent conflict? And what can we learn from reporting so far on the convention?
Thank you very much for this invitation. And through my answer, I will also try to touch upon one of the questions raised in the chat. So the SDGs and also the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework recognize the importance of data availability, validation and standardization, and also data exchange as a key means by which to build trust among decision makers. And as it has been said, knowledge and data exchange were often the trigger for transboundary cooperation, but also they're crucial to move forward on transboundary cooperation and to work on new topics such as climate change or new pollutants. The 1992 Water Convention serviced by UNECE provides a unique, now global legal and intergovernmental framework for transboundary water cooperation. It actually requires the countries, especially riparian countries, to exchange different types of data, to set up joint monitoring and alarm systems, to do joint assessments, but also to inform each other about critical situations such as floods, or accidental pollution. And the convention currently has 45 parties, also some from Africa now, but more than 130 countries worldwide participate in the meetings and activities. Actually supporting the countries on information and data exchange was one of the very first activities of the Water Convention. And the convention indeed has been for more than 15 years supporting countries in improving data exchange through capacity building, exchange of experience, developing guidance, and also projects on the ground. And that also covers sometimes technical issues such as harmonizing monitoring systems and etc., which are crucial for increasing the trust among riparian countries, as it has been said by some of the predecessors, and to prevent conflicts, because they create a shared understanding of the available resources in the basin. The future activities and monitoring and assessment, such as updating of the guidance, will be discussed at the 9th session of the meeting of the parties to the Water Convention on 29 September to 1st of October in Geneva and online, to which all of you invite you, and where also some new products will be launched, such as a handbook on transboundary water allocation or a practical guide on development of transboundary agreements. Now, as it was said in one of the questions, for some countries where cooperation is still low, the global framework, such as the SDGs, provide maybe an incentive to also promote data exchange. And that's what we see on the SDGs, and particularly on the SDG indicator 6.5.2, for which UNESCO and UNSC are the co-custodian agencies, and which analyzes the proportion of transboundary basin area with an operational arrangement for water cooperation. And here, at least annual exchange of information is actually one of the criteria to consider an arrangement as operational. And just today, 1 hour ago, we have launched the second reporting access, the second global report on this indicator. And on the positive side, this report is finding that 80%, more than 90% of countries sharing transboundary basins actually exchange data, mostly on environmental conditions, on future plan measures, and also on plan measures to prevent, control, and reduce transboundary impacts. But they exchange less data on emissions, diffuse pollution, and flow levels, including groundwater flow. And the report also shows that there are still significant challenges to data exchange, such as lack of comparability of data between the countries and inadequate resources, where I think the international financial institutions play an important role. The good news is also that we have had a high response rate, with 129 out of 153 countries worldwide sharing transboundary waters having submitted their reports. And we can see that in some cases, the work that the countries have actually improved their knowledge levels and improved their cooperation in the process of preparing these reports. For example, in Latin America, the process of preparing this indicator report on SDG indicator 6.5.2 between Panama and Colombia on the River Dorado basin has helped the countries to actually cooperate more broadly also on the more political level. And we can see similar examples in other parts of the world, also in Central Asia, for example, in the Chuchalas basin, and in some other parts of the world. Yeah, with this, I would like to just conclude by saying that indeed, global legal and intergovernmental frameworks such as the Water Convention, but also the SDGs, which are a high priority in many countries, I think can provide an enabling ground to further improve data exchange between countries, but much more work is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. And indeed, you answered to some extent the question in the chat. I don't know if there are other questions of participants for the chat. Otherwise, maybe my question to the panelists would be, so this data revolution, this availability of data in the public domain from remote sensing, does that revolution also affect the willingness, the political willingness, the preparedness of riparian countries to exchange data, or does it not? And you know, whomever of you would like to respond to that, please come in. And then after your answers, I think we'll give it to Christina for a quick wrap up.
Perhaps Martin, I can come and allow my colleagues a few minutes if they would like to respond. You know, we really wanted to do we had this initiative as Water Data Revolution. It's the fact that the data is actually there and available. And these data platforms that that are analyze ready data platforms such as Digital Earth Africa, which I know many of our colleagues in Africa are actually using that, or Google Earth Engine, the data is available and is accessible by everyone. So it's not really the big solution is, or the solution is already there and available, and this is just a way of increasing the use of these tools in a specific application. You know, what I mentioned earlier, you know, flood forecasting or water accounting to understand water allocation and water availability. So really our aim of our program at Siwa is to create that access and encourage river basin organizations who are the entry point for our data management, because that was one of the questions that came up. They're representing the riparian countries to really access that data and be able to use it and translate it into their decisions. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, I want to get back to Svansa's remark and her emphasis on the, you know, an importance of formal arrangements. And of course, you know, these remote sensing data, they can sort of circumvent that. Svansa, do you have any sense about how this data revolution affects transboundary information exchange?
Yes, I think it affects a lot because for the data exchange on a transboundary level to be efficient and effective, and for the countries to be able to exchange the data on a transboundary level, firstly, sufficient national capacities is important for the countries themselves to be able to generate data, to have access to data, and then process the data, and then exchange the data with the neighboring countries. So I think national capacities, sufficient national capacities, is very important.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that we have 5 minutes left. Is any of the panelists who wants to say a final word? Otherwise, I will give the floor to Christina for a quick wrap up.
Maybe Martin, I can come in there. Yeah, I wanted to comment a bit on the availability of remote sensing data and its applicability. So we had 1 or 2 projects where we used a lot of the remote sensing data, and we discovered that it is very useful to get the bigger picture. You still need to do quite a bit more to be able to get the right information that you need to make decisions. So after you use it, you need to go down to the local level to develop that information into something you can then really use to make decisions. So that availability at that level it helps to get us closer to where we want to get to. But I think you still need the diplomacy around still getting people to share the information and make decisions beyond what is available in the remote sensing world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sonia?
I would like to support what James just said, that data revolution is important, but it's not enough, because actually working on jointly finding and identifying and assessing and sharing information is also a trust building step in shared basins. And actually, as we see on, for example, on the Danube Basin and on others, doing a joint survey, traveling around the river basin with experts from the different countries is often a very first step, and bringing together the scientists often lays the basis for scientific cooperation. So data revolution is important, but it cannot replace those other aspects which I just mentioned.
Good, thank you. Christina?
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you very much to the panelists and also to Anders for his presentation earlier. I think this session really sort of highlighted how transboundary cooperation and what the tools are for transboundary cooperation to really sort of be a key factor in resilience building overall, and sort of using, and that's why it's a strategic priority really for the World Bank in supporting it, but also for the World Bank and its partners who are co-convening here, and many others, the government of the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the UNECE, and many other partners, to really sort of foster transboundary cooperation, and then use sort of the power of data and the power of new technologies to promote resilience building and trust building across all stakeholders, not only sort of at the country level, at the sort of government level, but really sort of to the users and decision makers at the national level, to build trust and resilience. And I think what was really very good is sort of this highlighting that Vansa did from Georgia, is sort of this how data exchange is really a key to successful transboundary cooperation, and also, as Sonia said, to trust building, and the importance to involve stakeholders at all levels, at the national level, because this national capacity to contribute to transboundary cooperation is so important. And then the importance of regional actors and actors of organizations that provide how-to guides, like we've heard from SADC, and also what the UNECE is doing with many of its handbook guides, sort of really on how to do it for the countries, and then sort of what global actors can do and data providers can do is bring the data as much as we can do publicly accessible, providing the knowledge and the technology that that we can sort of bring the data to those who use it, and not only the data that can be collected locally, but also the data that can be collected through the new technologies that we have now available. So it's really so important that every actor plays its role and contributes. And so I would like to thank again the panel for highlighting this, and Martin for your very good chairing of bringing out all these points. And with this, I close the session, because I think we're just out of time right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all.
Thank you.